Welcome back to Project Chana Power Hour. Each week we get together to learn and strengthen ourselves in our special mitzvahs of Kashrus, Shabbos, and Taras HaMishpacha, as well as other halachas that are pertinent to women. Our goal is to prepare ourselves and our homes to welcome Mashiach. Tonight's learning is dedicated Le'ulei Nishmas Harav Yitzchak ben Harav Eliezer Tzvi Zev Alav Shalom. May his neshama have an aliyah. If you would like to dedicate a class in honor or zchus of someone, please reach out via our email, projectchanapowerhouse@gmail.com. Please join us afterwards for tzedakah, tehillim, and a Mashiach thought. Okay, let's get started. For our first class of Hilchos Shabbos, we will be continuing with part 14 on our topic of Muktzah with Rabbi Braun. Rabbi Braun is the Morozow of Crown Heights, and we appreciate his time to be part of our program tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I think I was allowed to. Here we go. Streamy, hear me? Okay, beautiful. Okay. Okay, there's a couple of things we're going to go through this week, and hopefully we'll get to summarize all the halachas of Muktzah that we learned in the previous 13 classes. This is shir number 14, if my numbers are correct. At the end of last week, we started talking about Muktzah and how it involves non-Jews. The very last thing I think that we spoke about last week was that the halach is you're allowed to tell a non-Jew to move Muktzah. We've been speaking about, for the last 13 classes, all about us moving Muktzah, but if a person needs Muktzah to be moved, you can let ask a goy. We have halachas where you're not allowed to ask goyim to do things on Shabbos, but to have a goy move Muktzah for us, or because I need a place, or because I need to do something with the Muktzah, or because I'm embarrassed with it, or because it doesn't smell well. All those cases, I'm allowed to ask a guy to move the Muktzah. However, to move Muktzah for the sake of Muktzah per se, for the actual Muktzah item, for its purpose, because I don't want this item to protect the Muktzah, I don't want this item to be stolen, lost, damaged, ruined, then I'm not allowed to ask a guy to move Muktzah. So I'm only allowed to move Muktzah for anything, but if it's in order to protect the Muktzah item. That's rule number one in relation to non-Jews. Rule number two, if a non-Jew is working on a utensil, on an item, and he started making this item before Shabbos and he finished it on Shabbos, it does not become Muktzah, even though this item was not ready before Shabbos. The definition of the word Muktzah means something which has been set aside for non-Shabbos use. It's not prepared for Shabbos. The opposite word of Muktzah is Mukhan. It's ready for Shabbos. And this was an item which really wasn't supposed to be there on Shabbos, but because it's made by a goy, and the goy started making it on Friday, and he finished it on Shabbos. For example, let's take about bread. Now, we don't eat bread baked by non-Jews. It's pas palter, but there are certain communities which were lenient about pas palter. We're not going to go into the halachas of pas palter, but for argument's sake, if a non-Jew had a dough and he started baking it on Friday, he finished baking the dough on Shabbos, it is not muktzah. We can benefit from that dough, subject to the rules of Pasach and Paspalter. If the guy, however, did not start baking the dough on Friday, so the bread was only started to be made on Shabbos, or a dish, a utensil that he started making on Shabbos, then there's a disagreement whether that's called muktzah or not, because this was totally not ready before Shabbos. It was not in the world before Shabbos. It came into being on Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe paskins you should be stringent. Anything that a guy made on Shabbos, we should treat on Shabbos as muktzah. Unless it's a shas adchak, it's a desperate situation, for example, with bread. If you can't get any other bread, you're stuck. Or it's for a mitzvah. You need to make the bracha of hamoitzi, it's a sudas bris milah. Then we can rely on the lenient opinion and not consider it muktzah. Another halach in relation to non-Jews, a non-Jew captured an animal on Shabbos or Yom Tov. This animal, which was not free and available for you before Shabbos, because it was in the wild, now was captured. This item is muktzah for a yid. Likewise, if a guy ripped off something which is attached from something attached to the ground, picked an apple from a tree. He took fruit and he squeezed them, and now you want to have the juice. Now I'm talking about fruit that are made for squeezing, which the squeezing didn't start before Shabbos. In such a case, the halacha is fruits that are made for squeezing, even if they would flow on their own, you're not allowed to have benefit from the juice that oozes out of the grapes. So if a guy goes and squeezes his grapes, well, that's again another issue of stam yenim. But let's not talk about grapes. Let's talk about olives or whatever it is. Then it's muktzah for a Jew. Whatever wasn't ready before Shabbos is muktzah. So I got a guy and he captured. I didn't get him. He did it on his own. He captured an animal. He picked an apple, squeezed fruit. All of that is muktzah. A guy that brings items to my house, muktzah items to my house, he wants to put it around in my house, I'm allowed to tell him, hey, can you put it in the other room downstairs near the closet on the left side? That's not a problem. If these muktzah items belong to me and he's bringing it to my house, I'm not allowed to tell him where to put it down. That could be very relevant when we have a delivery coming to us on Shabbos. I can't tell him where to put it unless it's still in his hand. Because what are we talking about? The guy is putting aside the muktzah to hide it, to put it where it needs to be. And this is something to protect the muktzah item. And therefore, if it's the guy's item, for sure you're allowed to. If it's my item, so long he was still holding it, didn't put it down for a minute, then we have the heter that we always use in terms of muktzah. If I have muktzah in my hand, we mentioned in the previous classes that there's a disagreement whether once you hold muktzah, if you can still walk with the muktzah. And the Alter Rebbe says that we should generally, if it's real muktzah, gomer, proper 100% muktzah, and there's not a great loss, we should be machmer. With the guy, we're being lenient. If the guy was already holding the muktzah, okay, so let him go with the muktzah, so long he's holding it. Especially because the guy is putting it aside to hide it, to protect it. So that might be similar to the idea of loss. We said in the case of loss, we can be lenient. Once you're holding muktzah, you're allowed to put it wherever you want. So I wasn't holding the muktzah. The guy was holding the muktzah. The guy is working for me. Once he's holding it, I'm being lenient. He's putting it away. He's protecting it. It's ready in his hand. Either in that case, it's permissible, or if it belongs to the guy, so he's doing it for himself. Another rule about muktzah, which we didn't mention earlier, is food which is forbidden for Jewish people but permissible for non-Jewish people, or permissible for non-Jewish, and it's suitable for non-Jewish animals. I'm allowed to, this is food which is not suitable for human beings, it's suitable for animals, and I'm allowed to, according to halacha, if it's a food that I'm allowed to, according to halacha, give to a guy, give to his animals. It's not muktzah if it's a normal thing that you give it to animals or to a goyim. So I have a food in my house which is asr. It's treif. Treif is not usable on Shabbos, so it would be muktzah. But since it is permissible for a guy to have it, or if it's animal food, it's okay, it's suitable for animals, and it's a normal thing that people give this kind of thing away to guy or to animals. Animals are available, accessible, then it's not muktzah because it does have edibility on Shabbos. Something which is absolutely usher for a yid to use on Shabbos because Chazal made a decree, they don't want you to have benefit from this. For example, milk that was milked on Shabbos, Chazal said, Gzeira, we don't let you have benefit from milk that was milked on Shabbos because you might go and milk on Shabbos. Fruit that fell off the tree, you're not allowed to take because you might go and pick the fruit. In all these cases, that becomes totally usher, and therefore it's absolute muktzah. I mean, even if you could give it to a guy, no, it doesn't work that way. It's absolutely usher. You can't even give it to a guy. Obviously, the same rule applies with anything which is usher bahana, which is you don't have benefit from. Like chametz on Pesach, you can't say that this is edible because I could give it to a guy. You're not allowed to even give it to a guy. You're not allowed to even give it to animals. It's absolutely asr b'hana. Anything which is forbidden to have benefit from is absolute muktzah. Despite the fact that we said earlier that there are conditions attached to asking a guy to move muktzah for us, if there's a case where there's a person that's not well, even if it's what we call a minor sickness, in this case, the isra of hamidul nachri of asking a guy to do malacha has been put aside, and you can ask a guy to move muktzah. In a case where there's a great loss, for example, there's muktzah that's sitting out in the rain and it's going to get ruined. So because it's a hefsid meruba, Chazal allowed you to ask a guy to move muktzah. That's based on the principle of shvuz, the shvuz b'makam hefsid. I'm asking a guy, that's one shvuz, one rabbinic rule. I'm asking a guy to move muktzah. Move muktzah is another rabbinic rule. It's a double rabbinic rule. It's rabbinic of rabbinic, shvuz de shvuz. And it's a case of a great loss. This expensive item is going to get ruined in the rain. So Chazal allowed you to ask a guy to move the muktzah. If it's a case where it's a real, not stam a great loss, but it's a dover bohol, it's something which people go crazy about, fire, and I want to protect it from the fire. It's not in the house where the fire is, it's the house nearby where the fire is. There's robbers coming. Then Chazal allowed even a yid to move muktzah. That's an extreme example where they allow a yid to move muktzah as well. let's quickly summarize all the halachas of Muktzah that we did. We're not going to do all of it. Those were 13 classes, and a bit of this class too, that's already 14 classes. But we'll just try to go through again the categories of Muktzah briefly, and this seemingly will be the last year on Muktzah. The most extreme form of Muktzah is Muktzah Machmas Gufe, something which has zero suitability because of its very essence. It's something which is not a dish, not a utensil, not an edible food. It's actual Muktzah on its own merits. Stones, for example. Stones are not dishes. We don't eat them. Animals are muktzah, raw meat are muktzah. The most common place we to find muktzah machmas gufa, the real extreme form of muktzah, which you're not allowed to move under any circumstances, is in your pantry. And maybe even in your freezer, not in your tool room. Tool room would have usually a lesser form of muktzah. Muktzah machmas iser is something that you can't use on Shabbos because you'll end up doing something usher if you use it on Shabbos. That automatically becomes muktzah. So oil in your candelabra, in your candles, you have oil with your those who use oil Shabbos candles. That oil is muktzah machmas iser because there's no way to use that oil because the only way to use that oil is by extinguishing the candle. So therefore, the oil becomes muktzah, and even after the candles have been extinguished, that oil remains muktzah. You can't move it on Shabbos. A very word shmata that you use to wash the floor is muktzah because the minute you touch that shmata, it's going to start squeezing. So that shmata becomes muktzah. That's also an extreme form of muktzah. Kalisha malachta le'isr is a lesser form of muktzah. That's something which is primary use is for forbidden things on Shabbos. A pot. A primary use of a pot is to cook with. So long there's food in the pot, it's considered designated for heter. Its primary use now is to store food. But if you took the food out of the pot, this pot has primary functions is a cooking item. A cooking item is not a Shabbos kind of thing. And if the pot plus its cover is considered malachta leiser, if it's in a place that bothers people, we have a din of graf shalei, things that are in a place that disturb and bother, you're allowed to move muktzah on Shabbos altogether. If you want to do something with the pot, a permissible item with the pot, you're allowed to do it also on Shabbos. If you need a place, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos, but you can't move it to protect the pot. A comb, which is forbidden to use on Shabbos, is malachta l'isra. A soft comb, you're allowed to use on Shabbos. A telephone book is malachta l'isra. Its primary use is to make phone calls. Business books, catalogs, advertisement stuff. A lot of people look at these advertisement things on Shabbos. They are muktzah, klisha, malachta l'isra. And you now look at them on Shabbos altogether. A wallet for money, not if it has money. If it has money, then it has a whole different category. It's a buses. It's made for muktzah. Money is real, genuine muktzah. I'm talking about the wallet per se. The wallet's primary use is for money. Scissors, ruler. These are all categories of klisha malachta le'isr. A pocket knife is considered a regular knife. The pocket knife sometimes comes along with scissors and other kind of knives, but you're allowed to move the pocket knife even though through it other things will be moved along with it. A ruler, I said, is also malachta l'isr. Its primary use is for isr. Another category of muktzah is klisha malachta l'isr plus. What does that mean? Muktzah machmas chisaron kis, something which is primary use is for isr. But it could be used for heter, but you would never use it for heter because you're very particular. It shouldn't get ruined, defected, damaged. An example, an expensive pen. Now, pens are only malachta l'isr. If you have a pen on your Shabbos table and you need the place, you're allowed to move the pen. But an expensive pen is no longer malachta l'isr. It's already muktzah. It went up a level or down a level, whichever you want to call it. Muktzah machmas chisaron kis, because of its value, it's totally pushed aside for Shabbos use. A regular pen, maybe you could store your coffee with a pen. I don't know. Maybe you can use it as a bookmark. There's a lot of things you could do with pens. An expensive pen, no, it's only used for writing. You wouldn't use it for anything else. An expensive lighter, people wouldn't use it for anything else. Those are all a mila knife, a shchita knife. We mentioned all those examples in the past. Basis lodavar aser is the idea that you can have something which is a kosher malachta leheter non-muktzah item, but once muktzah is on it, the bottom item also becomes muktzah. Even after the top item was removed, once it was muktzah when Shabbos came in, it stays muktzah the whole entire Shabbos. Migud is katzoy ben hashmashas is katzoy l'kol yoyma. So the basis as in basis or base, has the same halach of the things that are on it. So if you put something which is forbidden to move on Shabbos and it's on your table becomes muktzah. If the item on top you're not allowed to move at all, then the table you're not allowed to move at all. It assumes the same rules. Even though you took off that muktzah item off your table already, it was removed. I don't know how it got off. Provided the muktzah item was there when Shabbos came in. If it came on in the middle of Shabbos, it doesn't become a basis. And it also only becomes a basis this is an important rule, if it was intentional, the plan was to keep it there when Shabbos comes in. If you forgot that you left it there, it fell there, it doesn't become a basa. So let me give you the practical example that we always have in our Shabbos homes. A candle burning when Shabbos comes in is muktzah. The table on which the candle was burning is also muktzah because it's a basis to the candle. Even after the candles go out, the table assumes the same status as the candles. The candles are a base, a basis to the flame, and now the candle is muktzah, and the table is automatically muktzah. Some people say the same thing will apply with klisha malachta l'isra. If you put a klisha malachta l'isra, which is a lesser form of muktzah, it's a hammer that you could technically, you're allowed to go crack on coconuts with a hammer on Shabbos. You're just not allowed to move a hammer if you want to protect the hammer. So some people say if there's a hammer on the table will assume the status of a klisha malachta l'isra. And you can't move the table even after the hammer is off, only to protect the table, only if you want to do something with the table. If something was put on the on a basis, but you don't really want it as a basis, you put a lighter on the tablecloth. No, you don't want it lighter on the tablecloth. You actually want it on the table. You just don't have place on the table, or you want to have a tablecloth on the table, but your agenda is that you really want the lighter on the table. Therefore, the tablecloth does not become a basis, only the table. In the rule of basis, we have a principle that whenever there's mutter and asr, there's two things on the table, forbidden and permissible, but the permissible item is worth more. Talk about the candle, it's worth more than the flame. And it's made for permissible things and for forbidden things. Then you're not going to move it, it doesn't become a basis. For example, again, all these things we learned in the past. If somebody before Shabbos puts on a table bread or other things that you need for the meal, puts a sefer, now the table is no longer muktzah to the candles because the bread, the challah, is more important than candles. On Shabbos, you need to eat your challah. A sefer has more valuable. This value has nothing to do with value of money. It's how important it's in your eyes. So if you have money in a sefer, on Shabbos, the sefer is more important to you than money. The table becomes a basis to the sefer much more than to the money, and that's why a lot of people put down a sefer on the table right when Shabbos comes in, before Shabbos comes in, so the table shouldn't become a basis to the leichter. That if at whatever stage a leichter is no longer there, you let him move the table now. Another category of muktzah is something that before Shabbos was still attached or wasn't captured yet. And another category of muktzah is a different kind of muktzah altogether, muktzah machmas mitzvah, something which is used for a mitzvah, like decorations for a sukkah. You now have benefit from them. They're set aside for the mitzvah. Since you now have benefit from it, it becomes muktzah on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Wood that you use for the sukkah, all are muktzah. The problem with muktzah is moving it. You can't move it in its normal way. Moving it with a shini in a not unusual way, moving it with your elbow, with the back of your hand, is always permissible, regardless of what your purpose of moving it, even if you're moving it to protect the muktzah. So that's a very important rule. Every time you confront muktzah on Shabbos, you're sitting on your seat in shul, and right in front, someone put their money, the worst form of muktzah machas gufay, a pen, which is a lesser form of muktzah, makes no difference what, on your bed, wherever it is. You could always move it with bishinui, what we call tilpul begufa, with your body. You're not moving it the normal way. You're moving with the back of your hand. Just go like this and move it off, and that's perfectly fine. Touching muktzah is not a problem. If you're touching without moving, is never a problem. The problem is moving. So you're not allowed to touch muktzah. That's a myth. That's, of course, provided if you're touching not for the purpose of the muktzah. If you're touching because you want it's important for the muktzah that it should be touched, whatever the reason is, then you're not allowed to touch on Shabbos. But the fact that you're touching it just matter-of-factly is not a problem. If you know that when you're going to touch the muktzah will move, of course you're not allowed to touch it, even though your intention is only to touch it, but it's one of those items that when you touch it or something moves, then of course you can't touch that on Shabbos. So touching per se, if it's not l'tzoyrech muktzah, is not a problem on Shabbos unless it comes along with moving. And we just mentioned this rule earlier, the rule that once you already got muktzah in your hands on Shabbos, beheter, you took a hammer because you're going to crack a coconut or because you needed the place, it's already in your hands, or you took real muktzah and you took it on Shabbos by mistake. Now it's in your hand, you let it go and move it wherever you want. You let it put it wherever you want, you don't have to throw it away from your hand. When it comes to real muktzah, it's best to put it down right away, unless it'll have a loss. If there's a loss, if there's a problem, you can't put down the hammer. It's dangerous. It could get ruined. Then hammer you let it anyhow. Hammer is klisham lafta liser. But let's talk about a real muktzah item. It's going to get lost. it's going to get ruined, it's going to get damaged. In any of those cases, you're allowed to put it in the place where you need. We learned also halachas about graf shalrei, about anything which is dirty, ugly, disgusting. Then the halacha is you're allowed to go move it on Shabbos, even if it's proper 100% muktzah, waste stuff, bathroom stuff, pills, all those things. You're not allowed to create a situation of graf shalrei lechatchila, of having something ugly and repulsive in front of you. But if it's already there and repulsive, then you're allowed to go move it on Shabbos. We spoke the other week that when you're eating on Shabbos, make sure your pills go straight into the garbage, or make sure there's still some food in it so you can go move it afterwards. We also spoke about the fact of the idea of bittul kli meheichana, that you're not allowed to go take an item and make it become muktzah on Shabbos. So by you doing something which will make the item become muktzah on Shabbos, that could also be a problem. It's hard to go through all those halachas right now. But that's a pretty quick summary. And Mr. Next week, we'll focus on the next topic. Hatzlacha Rabbah.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Braun. Thank you. Okay, for our next class, we are excited to continue the new series that we started last week, where we'll explore tznius and boundaries in the workplace with Mrs. Sara Morozow. Even if you're not in a situation when you're working with men, we believe this series will be interesting to you. We'll explore a sensitivity that we can all learn from to create and foster healthy and wholesome environments in the spaces around us. We are so grateful to have Mrs. Sara Morozow on our program. Mrs. Morozow is a well-known color teacher and mashpia to many. Thank you so much for being on our program tonight.
Okay, thank you so much. And now we will continue on the topic of women in the workplace and boundaries between men and women. In this generation, there's a strong emphasis on team efforts, company loyalty, and friendly relationships in the workplace. Even in schools, teacher-student positive connections are increasingly recognized as valuable from an educational standpoint and lead to better results. The balance of proper boundaries and proper connection can be confusing. At what point are we crossing a boundary of inappropriate closeness between opposite genders? Are we cordial, respectful, and polite? Are we kind, friendly, or getting too personal? In addition to the dry halachos, a great deal will depend on the specific situation, the type of people involved, the country, the environment, and culture. We encourage you to consult with your mashpia and rav to gain clarity for your specific situation. Perhaps after we review the halachos, I can share more examples so that we could know even what to consult with a rav and a mashpia about. Before we begin the halachos, I will add more insight on the topic of boundaries so that we can approach the halachos with the right mindset. When we are secure and confident that when we place the boundary, the other person will also feel secure as well. So there are 4 points that I want to talk about. First, I will state the 4 points, and then I will go on and to elaborate. So point number 1, at first glance, boundaries seem negative as they may seem to create distance or restrictions. In truth, Torah boundaries are positive and actually create healthy space. Point number 2, boundaries are put in place so each of us can maintain our uniqueness as men and women with our various talents and personalities, and at the same time join and work together for the common goal of making the world a b'dir b'tachtonim, and this is true shalom. Point number 3, man-made boundaries can create awkward feelings when we keep changing the rules based on our judgments, our personal feelings, and the feelings of people around us. However, we gain a sense of security and clarity when the boundary we put up is one that Hashem put in place. Point number 4, when we have clarity and calmness within ourselves about the boundary we set up, then this will be the vibe that will be mirrored by others in our sphere. Negative feelings, judgment, or rejection are not a result of Torah. They are most often a reaction from a non-Torah-based emotion, either from the person placing the boundaries or from the person on the other side. So let's explore some of these concepts that will help us understand these very important points. So in the very beginning of Torah, Hashem set up boundaries. At Bria Ha'olam, we see right away the word Vayavdil, and he separated. On day one, Hashem already created boundaries. He separated light and darkness, day and night, with dusk and dawn during the transition. This is one type of boundary where there's not a total separation. There's a little bit limited time when both merge together. On day two, again, Vayavdel, Hashem separated. Hashem separated between the upper waters and the lower waters. This type of boundary was a total separation with no shared space, which is one reason why on day two, Hashem did not say Ki Tov. Often, total separation results in machlokes. Day three, the word used in the pasuk is Yikovu Hamayim. The waters should gather themselves inward and allow the earth to emerge and be seen separately. That is a third type of boundary. We step aside and make space for the self-expression of others. So we see there are three types of boundaries right at the beginning of creation. Systems of boundaries are put in place from the very beginning for the world to function well. So now, when we are faced with a dilemma, how do we interact with the opposite gender? Which type of boundary is proper? Which one do we choose? A boundary where there's an overlap and togetherness? A boundary that entirely separates us? Or perhaps stepping inward and allowing the other a more public role? We turn to Torah for halacha and hadracha to seek guidance for which boundary is proper in every given situation. Now, circling back to Brias Ha'olam, there's another important point. Every aspect in creation, Hashem declared exact boundaries for each and every nivra on all levels of creation. Doimim, tzemeach, chayim, medaber. Some examples. Doimim, water. Waters of the ocean have to end at a certain place. If not, the world is flooded and it causes destruction. Think tsunami or a hurricane. So too in the plant and animal kingdom. If the animals of the forest choose to walk out of the forest and begin to inhabit the cities, that is destructive. And millions of examples when you study ecology. So in Parshas Korach, a Sicha in Chilkut Ches, Sicha Gimel Parshas Korach, the Rebbe elaborates on the topic of boundaries. Korach argued that all Jews are equal. There's no difference between Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. And the Rebbe explains that true shalom, true peace, is not by removing boundaries and equalizing people, time, and space, but by recognizing and appreciating there are differences and varied roles. By respecting boundaries that Hashem put in place, each of us, with our varied roles and tafkid, can work together in a united effort to fulfill Hashem's will and make a dir b'tachtonim. And the Rebbe elaborates and discusses boundaries in olam, space, shana, time, and nefesh, people, in the realms of holiness. For example, in olam, in space, we have the rest of the world. We have Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. We have Yerushalayim. We have Har HaBayis, and the various levels of Kedusha within Har HaBayis and the Beis HaMikdash, all the way up to the Kodesh HaKodashim. Each space has its own unique role and limitations. Who can enter, how they can enter, who can function there. We have Shana, time. There's the everyday, there's Shabbos, there's Yom Tov, Chol Hamoed, Rosh Chodesh, Yom Kippur. Every day has its own unique role, and every day has to be respected, and we have to work within the rules and regulations that govern each and every moment of time. So too, when it comes to nefesh, people. They're regular people. We have Yisrael, we have Kohen, we have Levi, Kohen, Kohen Gadol, we have women, we have men. And within each of those categories, there's various people with different talents that give to the world something unique and different. When we all work individually and in sync with each other, when one can be truly a healthy person, like in the human body. Every limb, various bodily functions. We have the mind, we have the heart, we have the reproductive system, we have the respiratory system, we have bones. Every part of our body has to fulfill its own unique role within the limitations and the rules and regulations that Abshah put into them. Plus, together, each one also has to work in sync with the entire body so that the body can be healthy. So too, says the Rebbe, we find with the boundaries that Hashem placed between men and women. And I want to read actually a piece of the Sikha inside, especially this follows the discussion of men and women when they want to be the same, but really, in essence, they're different. The Rebbe says, "Zetten von dem Meise Korach Ayra." We learn from the story of Korach a lesson. As wenn men will chas v'shal mevatel sein gvulos was a cholok HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai, When Chas Hashem we want to abolish the boundaries that Hashem put in place in his very own world that he created. He created the world, he put the boundaries in place. So when we want to abolish those boundaries, is nice if ikr, besides the main point, as does is Hepech Teres Moshe versus Teres Hashem, Nechelku Al Baruch Hu, besides the most important point that we're actually acting against Hashem himself. In addition to that, bringt men der mit, nit king shalom. This doesn't bring peace when we interfere with the boundaries and we want to abolish them. Nor verkehrt perd halavavos. It brings actually disharmony, disunity between people. Dafke durch aufhalten und verstärken de mechitzes voice was cholok Baruch Hu. In fact, it's exactly when we uphold and we strengthen the borders that Hashem put in his world, and more specifically here was between men and women. Und jeder einer und eine führt durch sein Tafkid zu welcher der Eibusher sie beschaffen. And specifically, when every man and woman will fulfill their unique role for which Hashem created them, that's when we create true peace. Was es darf sein zwischen die verschiedenen Sugim, there has to be between the different categories, the different types. Warum says a shalom was is gebaut of Torah was called shalom. When peace is built on Torah, and about Torah it says its pathways are pathways of peace. Shalom is always pathways are that of peace. That's when those boundaries actually won't create separation. They will actually create peaceful coexistence and unity. Now, does that mean we never feel that boundaries can be limiting or restrictive? So when we have the mindset that this particular limitation or boundary is to our benefit, then our attitude changes. We accept them, we embrace them, and we're happy to live with them. And when we feel that this particular boundary stands in our way, that's when we begin to feel a sense of negativity and restrictiveness. So I'll give you some examples in Olam Hazeh where we have so many boundaries that are put in place, and we're happy with them. We live with them because we know that's the only way we can function in a healthy way. For example, think a cup of water. In order for a flow of water to be drinkable, it needs to go through pipes and a faucet and then into the cup. Each of these three levels is a type of boundary that takes the energy or the flow and contains it in order to make it useful. You can be at Niagara Falls where water is abundant and be so very thirsty. You still need that bottle or cup and a way to get that water to be useful to you. So let's recognize that a boundary can feel restrictive, but when it serves a goal that we appreciate, our negative attitude falls away. Think of seatbelts and car seats. When I was a young girl, the law of seatbelts and car seats wasn't in place yet. We used to fly in our station wagon from Montreal to New York, and Baruch Hashem, we got there safely. But I remember the day that this new law came into place, and all of a sudden we had to be tied down to a seat, and the young kids had to be in car seats. We thought this is impossible. This like, forget it. It's like we're in a cage. But Baruch Hashem, with the right mindset that this is to our own benefit for health and safety, we adjusted to this concept of car seats and seatbelts. Now, would any of you, Chas v'shalom, think twice of entering a car or not put your baby in the proper seatbelt? Chas v'shalom. Of course, for health and safety, even though it may be inconvenient and maybe a little schlep, but that's what we do because we know it's a positive thing. Or more examples, we use foam protectors, so our foam falls, it won't break. Do we have to put a foam protector? It's not the law. It's our own choice. But in order to protect something that's precious to us, we add that extra layer of boundaries. Another example, we use blockers and filters on our phones and other devices. They're restrictive, they have limitations, they can be annoying. But we impose them upon ourselves for positive purposes. And when we are aware that the boundary serves a positive purpose, we're okay with it. So just like in worldly matters, we are okay and we appreciate boundaries when for health and safety, all the more so do we appreciate and value the boundaries that the Eibishter put into place out of his wisdom and great kindness. Let's take this a step further. The more precious something is, the more boundaries you put in place. A fence around our private property, a fence around a parking lot, or a fence at the side of a cliff on a hiking trail all protect that which is precious to us, our private spaces, our children playing in the next field, or our very lives. The more important information that needs to be protected, the more elaborate the security systems and firewalls around it. We can't compare the level of security systems on our own personal devices than the level of security systems around those of the Pentagon. So in a Yechidus, Mrs. Yehudas Fishman asked the Rebbe why there are such strict rules in Judaism regarding relationships between men and women. And the Rebbe responded by comparing the energy between men and women to atomic power and energy. It can be highly creative and constructive when used the right way, and extremely destructive when misused. In the Sikh of Parshas Kairach that we mentioned earlier, the Rebbe adds a mashal of a pot. We have fire and water, which is like man and woman. There are two opposites. And fire and water would extinguish each other. They cannot exist as one. It is precisely the boundary between them, the piece of metal called pot, that enables the fire to heat the water, and now we can enjoy some hot tea or coffee. So due to the potency of male-female connection, Hashem set up layers of protection for our own personal benefit, and as well to protect Kedushas Am Yisrael. Like Chazal say, Kol mokom she'ata moitze geder erva, ata moitze kedusha. When we find a boundary in place to guard against erva, immorality, that is where we find that we can uphold the highest level of kedusha. I want to add another detail of being uncomfortable with boundaries. Boundaries that are placed between people can create awkward and uncomfortable feelings. However, when the boundary is placed by Hashem, then we are calm and secure. Think of a yichud. We don't have to analyze who we're comfortable or uncomfortable to be alone with, or allow our children to be alone or not alone with. We don't have to have the tension of constant judgment calls and analyzing how the other person will feel about it. If I tell him, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable if you're alone with my daughter. The fact that Torah says so simplifies the rule and removes the awkwardness. This is just how it is. And I must say, just yesterday, I had to have this thought in mind. Somebody very close to me popped in for a very surprise visit, and it meant a lot to me. However, due to the level of our relationship, it was also for me to actually give him a hug and a kiss. And I sat there and I was holding myself back from expression of affection. And first I had this feeling of like negativity, of awkwardness. But as soon as I said, hey, this is good, the Eibush should put this in place. This doesn't show that we don't love each other, we don't care for each other, we are not so excited about seeing each other. This is just a fact that the Eibush is doing for our benefit. And that brought calmness and security in my heart. However, sometimes a boundary will generate a feeling of awkwardness, of frustration, or even resentment. And then it's time to stop and think why this is so. There are many reasons why this can happen, and it's a good thing to allow yourself to tune into your emotions and your feelings about the boundaries you face. And if you feel negative vibes, both within yourself and for the people around you, it's important to figure out why this is happening. What is the dynamic? Is it something inside of us? Is it something external? And we find a way to resolve it. We will discuss this more at the end after we study the halachos, because then we will bring more examples and it will be more practical. But right now, I just want to add that if you do still feel negative about boundaries, even if Torah says so, there's more that you could discover and more you could work through so that it actually maintains that positive feeling. So we now agree that Torah boundaries are healthy and positive. Hashem dictates restrictions and limitations to protect that which is precious. It may be awkward not to shake the stretched out hand of a male business partner or decline to attend the company party. However, our appreciation of Hashem's wisdom and kindness to help his creations function in the best way possible, helps us feel content within our halachic boundaries. I misread a pasuk, so here's the pasuk from Mishlei. About Torah, it says, Dracha darchei noyam v'chol nesiveseh sholem. The Torah's ways are pleasant ways, and all of its paths are peaceful. The Torah's way of life is good for our body and our soul. And this is the pasuk, the theme that we're going to hear over and over again, that creating Torah boundaries doesn't create a rift, doesn't create a disconnect, does not create negative feelings. If it's Al Pi Torah, those boundaries actually are peaceful and pleasant. I also want to urge you, if you have any questions that you want we should address on the Power Hour segment, please email to Project Chana Power Hour. Chana is without the H. Project Chana Power Hour @gmail.com. as well as we are looking to collect short anecdotes of how you put in about a Torah boundary in place and how you felt good about it, because we're looking to share tips for people. I just met actually somebody in the street who shared with me that she usually has a job on a regular basis, and she is going away. She's going to be traveling, so she had to tell her boss that she won't be available, and she's going to be doing something else instead. So she was about to message to her boss about her traveling plans, where she's going to visit. She just thought it's a mental thing to do, and then she stopped and she said, "My boss doesn't have to know all my plans. It doesn't matter to him if I'm for what reason I'm not available." And instead, she messaged her boss, "I will not be available from this time to this time, and this is what I'm going to do instead." And it was perfectly fine. So she put that boundary because she wanted to keep the relationship with her boss more cordial and less personal. And she actually said she felt very good about it, and so did he. It was like really no problem. So anyways, girls, again, young ladies and old ladies and everybody in between, if you have a little anecdote that you want to share, how you put a boundary or you changed something and how things were better because of it, please let us know. Or if you have a question you want us to address, the email again is Project Chana, without the H, means CHANA, Project Chana, powerhour@gmail.com. Mirz Hashem, to be continued next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Morozow. Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, for our next class on Kashrus, tonight we will be starting a new topic in our harmful food series. Is there such a thing as dangerous drinks? We'll find out with Rabbi Nissan Zibell. Rabbi Zibell is the Kashrus administrator at the RCF, the Rabbinate of Central Florida, and delivers classes to the general public on various Kashrus topics. He is also highly active in answering consumers' Kashrus questions on a daily basis. Thank you very much for being part of our program tonight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and a good evening. As mentioned, we're going to be starting Harmful Foods Part 8, and we're starting within Harmful Foods the series on dangerous drinks. This week will be Part A, and hopefully next week Part B. Last week we finished the topic of the dangers when it comes to fish and milk. This week we're going to be starting a new topic, dangers when it comes to drinks, and we'll be starting with the danger that's brought down in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch regarding water that was left in a metal vessel overnight. So this begins with a Gemara in Maseches Nida that mentions that a drink that was diluted with water, which many times it was common those days, even today, to take a concentrate and to add water to dilute a drink with some water. If it was left in a metal container overnight, there is a danger, there is a ruach ra, there is a spiritually harmful evil spirit that is in there, and one should not consume that drink. It's forbidden to consume that drink because of the danger. This halacha was not, this sakana was not brought down anywhere in halacha, in the Rambam or in the Tur or the Shulchan Aruch. However, the Alter Rebbe does mention it. The Alter Rebbe mentions it in the dinim of Shmiras Guf Nefesh, and over there in Halacha Zayin, the Alter Rebbe brings this halacha, and he brings, first of all, what the Gemara mentions, that any drink that's diluted with water that remained in a kli, in a vessel of mateches, which is generally metal, overnight is a danger and one should not consume it. And then the Alter Rebbe adds a step further, and he adds that seemingly it's obvious that for sure plain water, just water on its own that was left overnight in a container that's made out of metal, would for sure be an issue. This is a logical inference, because if the Gemara is saying that a little bit of water added to dilute a drink makes it problematic, So the Alter Rebbe just adds, for sure, if it was pure water, it would be problematic. However, the Alter Rebbe puts this in parentheses, and we're known that a rule is the Rebbe put things in, the Alter Rebbe put things in parentheses when he was not 100% sure and he was planning on going back to review that detail. And someone who explained it, the Alter Rebbe writes that, puts that in parentheses because since these are matters of danger and spiritual dangers, regular logic may not apply. It may not be logical that if a little bit of water mixed into a drink is an issue, then for sure a lot of plain water is. Maybe the spiritual danger doesn't apply there, but then the Alter Rebbe left it in parentheses and ultimately was printed. So it seems like the Alter Rebbe didn't retract from it, but the fact that it's in parentheses shows that the Alter Rebbe was a bit reserved when it comes to this halacha. But practically speaking, it was published, and it's halacha that is published by the Alter Rebbe. Now, there's many details which we're going to discuss, and practically as well. How do we do it? How do we do it today? First of all, there's seemingly a contradiction because the Alter Rebbe in the halachas of matzah, when it comes to making matzah and keeping the water called mayim shelanu, water that we keep overnight in containers, so they should reach proper room temperature before making matzahs. The Alter Rebbe discusses over there that this water can be kept in metal containers even for several days, and this seems from there that there's no danger mentioned whatsoever. So the Rebbe actually addresses this in a letter, and the Rebbe explains that it could be in that specific case, the Alter Rebbe allows it because that water is not going to be drunk. If you look at the Gemara, you look at the wording of Alter Rebbe, it says specifically one should not drink water that remained overnight in a metal container. Over there by matzah, the water is going to be mixed into a dough and made into a dough. Maybe in such a case, the Rebbe says that the sakana does not apply. So that's how the Rebbe explains this contradiction within the Alter Rebbe. So based on this, the sakana, this danger, does not apply when something is going to be mixed into a food and ultimately, basically, not be seen anymore as water. It's going to be totally absorbed and turned into a dough and baked like matzah. You don't notice the water anymore, so in such a case, it doesn't apply. However, when it's still noticeable is when it applies, and this applies to any liquids that has water in it. So practically speaking, it would apply to soup. It would apply to any drinks that we have that has some water mixed in. It would apply to canned foods that have water mixed in while cooking, which has liquid in it. It would apply to a can of soda that has water in it. Soda for sure has some water mixed into it. And it would apply to many things. Any foods that we cook that has liquids that's visible, including cholent. And this applies to food even if the food is hot and even if the food is boiling or cooking and it's left overnight, it would apply. So keeping this, we would have a few dilemmas. One dilemma would be when it comes to Shabbos. If someone wants to keep water hot overnight on Shabbos, they usually keep it in an urn or a chainik. And those are made out of metal. How could one consume hot water the next day since it was left overnight? In addition, cholent on Shabbos is left overnight. Cholent usually has visible liquid, unless it dried out totally and there's no visible liquid, but usually there's visible liquid. That visible liquid has water. So in such a case, how could one consume the cholent if it was overnight? And there could be other practical implications. Another application is when we have water coming out of the sink. The water was in pipes throughout the night. Those pipes are usually made out of metal, and it was in those pipes overnight. When you turn on your sink in the morning, you drink, you're going to be receiving water that was left overnight in pipes. How does one approach such a situation? So when it comes to sink water, actually, there's a letter from the Rebbe that addresses this. The Rebbe letter in the Igros Kodesh, Chelek Beis, page Kuf Mem Gimel, and the Rebbe addresses various points as to why one could be lenient. And the Rebbe specifically addressing the water system in Yerushalayim. That water was left in a metal cistern overnight. However, Rabbanim explained that this equally applies to water left in metal pipes overnight, which is the case in most places, most cities, that whatever the Rebbe wrote over there would also apply to pipes. Well, I'll pull up the Rebbe's letter. Maybe we could read a little bit of it inside to see the Rebbe's approach in regards to this. So we're not going to go through the entire letter. However, we're going to mention a few points from the Rebbe. First of all, the Rebbe mentions, we'll start here. So the Rebbe himself says, when I myself want to explain that people that are God-fearing, and then they do consume this water, which was left overnight in a metal cistern or metal pipes. The Rebbe says this whole concept of these drinks being left and being a danger is when they were left in a vessel. The Rebbe explains this means a vessel which is detached from the ground, a regular vessel. Regular vessels that are found are not attached to the ground. However, the Rebbe says if the vessel is connected to a structure like a building or a house which is connected to the ground, or if it's directly connected to the ground, according to halacha, many and when it's connected to the ground or connected to a structure that's connected to the ground. In such a case, the Rebbe says when it comes to these matters of spiritual evil spirits, bad spirits, we don't know too much how they function, how they work, and we're not going to add anything new. We're only going to take what we were told. We were told water that was left in the vessel. The moment the vessel is attached to the ground, it's already a different vessel, and we're not going to extend now this danger, which we can't really wrap our heads around, to a new scenario, and we're just going to leave it to the literal scenario that's brought. So in short, the Rebbe gives two reasons why one can be lenient when it comes to water that was left in a cistern or in metal pipes overnight. First of all, the reason that the Rebbe mentions is that we can only apply the literal danger that we're told, since this is spiritual, ruach ra, bad spirits, we don't know how it works, we can't really wrap our heads around it. Exactly what we're told is what we keep. We're told in a kli, in a vessel, water or drink with water left in the vessel, that's what we keep. The moment the vessel is connected to the ground, it has a different halachic status, and we won't extend now this danger also to a vessel connected to the ground. Therefore, the cistern or the water pipe, since they're connected to the ground, we won't apply the danger there, and it doesn't apply there. And in addition to that, the Rebbe brings that in matters of danger, there's a rule that Shemer P'sayim Hashem, when the majority of people neglect this danger, Hashem protects the simple or the foolish. Hashem protects them because of their they're not acting with their knowledge, and they should have known better. But ultimately, the majority of people are doing it. Hashem protects them, and the Rebbe adds, when it comes to spiritual dangers, we apply even further. That's the moment the majority of people don't keep them, they just cease to exist. They're not any more a danger, because the way it works spiritually, if most people are not even any more careful with it, it's not even something we have to be worried and concerned with. And therefore, the Rebbe writes, since majority of people drink tap water, we cannot. It's not even any more a danger. It ceased to exist, and there's no concern when it comes to that. But the Rebbe specifically only addressed tap water or water that was in a cistern connected to the ground overnight. The Rebbe wasn't writing off this entire halacha. The Rebbe specifically was addressing tap water that was left overnight in a metal container. However, we see in halacha that there are some opinions that address and say that electric components or electric appliances that are connected, that only work when connected to the wall, that's called connected to the ground. As the Rebbe mentioned in his letter, anything connected to a structure that's connected to the ground. So a plug that's plugged into the wall that can only the appliance can only be used when plugged in. We consider now this an appliance that's connected to the ground because the house is connected to the ground, and the moment you disconnect it, it can't work anymore. So some extend that leniency to anything electric that has to be plugged in. So if someone had an electric urn plugged in, it would not be an issue. And if somebody had an electric pot that was directly connected to the wall, and the pot as well is connected to the wall, which is a bit harder to imagine, like a crock pot usually. Well, a crock pot doesn't apply because a crock pot is not made out of metal, it's made out of earthenware, so it doesn't apply. So if someone's using a crock pot to keep their chalent, that would not be an issue. If someone had, for whatever reason, a metal pot, if that metal pot was directly attached to the wall with a plug, it wouldn't be an issue. But generally people keep their chalent in a crock pot, and that's not really a concern. So when would it be a concern? If someone's keeping hot water in a chaynik on the blech, not plugged in, or if someone's keeping chalent in a metal pot on the fire on the blech, which the way it was done before crock pots came around, then there would be more of a concern. But even for that, we are told witnesses that have seen that the Rebbe would drink hot water on Shabbos from a chaynik, from an urn that was left on a blech and was not connected electrically. And based on that, based on the fact also that many are not careful with this danger, both when it comes to tap water and in general in other areas, it seems like this is something that, like the Rebbe wrote in his letter, that if many people are not careful with anymore, the danger is not really anything that we have to be careful with, and not just when it comes to tap water. It seems like it extended anything all across the board for this danger. And there's actually a letter, a handwritten note that was published by the Beis Mashiach from the Rebbe, which seemed to be saying that the Rebbe brings that an example of something that was that's not kept anymore by people. He brings an example is the water that was left in a metal container overnight. The Rebbe brings that as an example is that something that people are not careful with anymore. Although we know clearly there are stories of the previous Rebbeim, like the Rebbe Maharash, that specifically kept water over Shabbos in a container that was earthenware. So that would be a bit different if someone following that. But the Gabe regarding practically our generation, it seems like there is what to rely on to not have to be careful about the sakana. Obviously, like all these matters, one should be in touch with their Rav and find out what they should be practically speaking, what they should be following in regards to this. There's some that want to say that for Shabbos there is no concern, since Shabbos is a special day and Shabbos protects. However, we see from stories of the Rebbe Maharash that the Rebbe Maharash was careful with this even on Shabbos. So Shabbos would not specifically make an exception to that. But again, as mentioned, my Sarav that practically speaking, the Rebbe it's witnessed by people that the Rebbe did drink water that was left overnight. So many rely on that and generally are not careful with this sakana, with this danger, especially because it's not brought anywhere else in halacha. And in regards to the one that when it's specifically water, the Alter Rebbe wrote that in parentheses, which is another reason maybe to be a little bit more lenient regarding plain water that was left in a metal container. And we'll stop here for today.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Zibell. Thank you. We want to make a special announcement. Tomorrow night, there will be a Farbrengen in Crown Heights to mark the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. It will be at the Rabashkin residence. Doors will open at 7:45, and the program begins at 8. We hope you can make it. Before we do our conclusion of Tehillim and a Mashiach thought, we want to reach out to all our listeners. If you enjoy these important and practical weekly classes, please consider being our partner to keep them going. We rely on and appreciate all contributions, any amount. Log on to mikvah.org/donate and select Project Chana Power Hour to go towards our program. Thank you. Okay, let's put a coin in the pushka. And we're going to say the Rebbe's Kapitel together, as well as Kapitel Chaf for Eretz Yisrael. Shir HaMalais, LeDavid. Lulei Adonai shahaya lanu, yaimana Yisrael. Lulei Adonai shahaya lanu, bekum aleina Adam. Azai chayim balaunu, bacharois apam banu. Azai hamayim shetafunu, nachla avar al nafshenu. Azai avar al nafshenu, hamayim hazeidoinim. Baruch Adonai shalai nasanana teref lishinehem. Nafshenu kitzipa nimlata, mipach yagshim hapach nishbar, va'anachnu nimlotnu. Ezreinu b'shem Adonai, aisei shamayim va'aretz. Let's all have in mind the safety of our hostages and all Yidden around the world. Lamnatseach Mizmar LeDavid. Yancha Adonai b'yayim Sara, Yisagevcha Shem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach Ezracha Mikaidesh, Umitzion Yisadeka. Yizkar kol min chaysecha, Vailascha Yedash Nesela. Yiten lachachel vavecha, V'chal atzascha Yamale. Neranana b'shuasecha, V'shem Eloheinu nidgal, Yamale Adonai kol mishalaysecha. Ata yadati ki haishia Adonai Mashiachai, Ya'anehu mishmei kadshay, B'gvorais yesha yaminai. Ele v'rechev ve'ele v'asusim, v'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu nazkir. Hei makaru v'nafalu, v'anachnu kamnu v'nisaydad, Adonai haishia, hamelech ya'aneinu, b'yayim kareinu. We will now do a short Mashiach thought. In our days, says the Rabbi, we may assume that all problems have been corrected and atoned for, especially when we take into account all the suffering of the Jewish people throughout the generations of Golus. Moreover, we have even concluded polishing the buttons, so that it remains only for us to stand ready, all types of Jews united, to receive and greet Mashiach Tzidkenu. Quick reminders. If you appreciate these weekly classes, share them with your family and friends. All playbacks are available on mikvah.org/powerhouse and also on all podcast platforms as well as 24/6. Search us up as Project Chana Power Hour. If you have questions on the classes or would like to dedicate a week of learning in honor or le'olei nishmas someone, please reach out to us on our email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you again next week, and may our learning prepare us and our homes and bring every Jew home to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach now. Thank you for joining. Good night.